Let's talk sustainability. What do we mean by sustainability? There's a lot of different meanings that are covered by this word. This past 10, 15 years, people have put different things into that, from very good and genuine intentions and activities into some less good and less genuine activities, which we can call greenwashing. Now, what does it really mean to be sustainable? Placing ourselves from the standpoint of view of an organization, I mean, in terms of a business, because things happen being mainly sustained, triggered very often by businesses. We all know that, unfortunately, sad reality that if we want something to happen and if we want something to be sustained over time, we need to have a strong business case. So we need to prove, all of our political and business leaders, that there is actually something to be gained from being sustainable, which will bring them more than what they're losing if they don't do it. So how do we do that from a business perspective? Different ways of doing this. And project management, the overall framework, capital P, capital M, is something that will definitely help us with that. And why don't I limit just project management to its, I would say, tools and techniques, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing, everything very boring you find in the PMBOK guide? It's because we need to enlarge the perspective. And here, I'm sure my friend Michel Thierry will be happy about that. We'll go into program management and we'll go into value management. Because sustainability is that, being able to actually create value. Sustainability is your ability to create value. What do we mean by value? Value is a balance. It's an equilibrium. It's an equilibrium between the resources we use and the value we produce. If you use too much of resources than value you produce, actually, you're breaking that balance and you're not creating value. So it starts very early in the process. I would say it starts with business analysis, how we define the different requirements we need to perform to make sure that we do exactly what we have to do and nothing more and nothing less. Because if you do more, guess what happens? You will use more resources than what is actually necessary, and you won't satisfy the full need of your customers. So then you're wasting. Waste, you're not sustainable anymore. And if you do not enough, what happens is that your customers will look for some other place, other additional resources here to fulfill that gap which you left. And the problem here is that if you take another source of services, features, and so on, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It would be 1 + 1 = very often 2.5 or even sometimes 3. So again, will create a waste of resources. So this is what sustainability is about. Thinking first of what kind of value you will generate, how do you measure that value, and how do you make the ratio between that value you want to create and the resources which you need to use there. And these resources you need to use there, actually, they are entrusted to you, and it's your role and your responsibility to make sure that they are properly used. This is where we go, in fact, into the usual mechanism of project management. Project management, delivering what you have to deliver on time, on scope, on budget. Easygoing, most of the time. So if you have delivered on time, that's good. But now, what comes next? We all know that nowadays, delivering a project or the outcome of that project is not sufficient anymore. We need to make sure that this outcome of your project delivers that value on a sustainable manner. And how do we do this? How do we make sure that it's not just a one shot? How do we make sure that actually this is something that, again, creates value and creates value over time in a sustainable way. Because we all know this, you can work on delivering an information system, delivering it on time, on scope, on specifications, on budget. Yes, happens, don't laugh. And when you install it with your users and your users look at you and say, I'm sorry, my Excel spreadsheet works better, you just have wasted the resources, again, entrusted to you. So the idea is to create an outcome of your project which will actually last over time and create value over time for your different stakeholders, a sustainable value. How far this value has to be sustainable? That's actually a great question, because it's not an easy question. This, we need to go a step above and look at the organization strategy, which is also very much linked to the ability of the organization to sustain itself. When an organization looks at its plans, its strategies, its budgets, it has to determine it within a certain time frame, something which we call the strategic horizon of the organization. The strategic horizon is mainly determined by how far the organization needs to look in order to get a return on investment over the resources which it's using, or over the renewal of these resources. Again, it's strongly tied to sustainability. Because nowadays, we use very much to say that organizations plan their strategies with quite a short time frame. 1 year, 3 years. Organizations that plan beyond that 3-year horizon are actually quite seldom. But think about it. Picture yourselves driving your car. And where do you look at? Are you looking at the edge of the hood of the car? Or are you looking as far as possible? Obviously, you're looking as far as possible. Because if you're looking just at the edge of the hood of your car and an obstacle comes to you, you see it last minute. So what happens? You have to introduce a change in the steering wheel of your car, or in the direction of your organization in this case, which will most probably take your car and your organization off the road. You will have to accelerate consumption of resources or block it in a way that, in fact, will create another consumption of these resources. So this is problematic, as if you're looking as far as you can, you see the obstacle coming from far away, and you have the time to anticipate a slight limited change, which will less consume your resources, which will allow your organization and your car to actually absorb smoothly the change you want to input in its orientation, in its direction, and go around the obstacle. So in order to be sustainable as an organization, in order to be resilient in front of the different obstacles that comes towards it, in order to properly use the resources which are entrusted to that organization, actually, the organization will need to push as far as possible this strategic horizon. And this strategic horizon is something which actually we determine very carefully. And this strategic horizon is something that will determine when do you need to actually generate the return on investment of your project. How far can you look in the forecast of your budgets, in the evolution of your strategic environment, in order to be able to predict how long the outcomes of your projects, the outcomes of your businesses have to generate that return on investment. In fact, this is how you determine where is the sustainability horizon of your organization, and how to plan the usage of your resources along that strategic horizon. And the more you push that strategic horizon, the more you have time, in fact, to determine how you will use these resources in order to use the right amount of resources when it's actually necessary, not more, not less, in order to be able to allow these resources to renew, recycle themselves, in order to make sure that you give also time to your organization, to your stakeholders, to absorb the outcomes of your project and transform them into a value sustainable over the duration of your strategic plan until you reach that strategic horizon. And it's something that is, in fact, a cycle. As you move forward on your strategic journey, you push that horizon forward. So it's like a real horizon. You can walk as far as you want. You will never touch the horizon, because as far as you walk, your horizon moves forward with you. But how far do you need to get that visibility? This is what will determine how you will use these resources. So in this case, we solve also the way of balancing the different aspects of sustainability for organizations, which very often are designated with the terms ESG, environmental, social, governance. We scratched a bit the aspect of governance while determining that strategic horizon, while thinking very early into your projects and into your programs with strong business analysis systems in place to determine what will be that value, planning the strategy of your organization to determine how long that value should be delivered, and when do you get that return on investment. The environmental piece is actually mainly addressed by project management itself. How do you use your resources? What is the quantity of resources which you invest? How do you manage its consumption along the operation cycle even of the outcome of your project? Now, the social aspect is also, I think, one of the most important ones here. The social aspect is everything which pertains to the human dimension of things. Sustainability in the human dimension of things relates to the very perception of having a safe space around the people. How do you take care of your employees once, so they take care of your business, as Branson was saying, and also how you create this trustful relationship with your clients, with your stakeholders, with your business partners. Trust is a very important component of business. Trust is what will allow to develop sustainable relationships. But trust is triggered by actually how responsible you are in treating the people and using your resources. So in fact, sustainability is a cycle. It's not just a pyramid as we often see with E, S, and G into this triangle. It's a cycle. How well you manage the environmental piece of your resources, how well you manage your governance in order to manage the environmental piece of your resources, how well you manage the social aspect, which will create trust with the people you interact with. All of these things will determine how sustainable and resilient will be your organization. And it's a virtuous cycle which we put in place here. The better you are at using your resources, the better you are at creating long-term sustainable value for your customers, the more trust you will generate. The more trust you generate, the more you will be able to convince actually these clients to use and purchase your products and services. There was a study from Endelman a few years ago that showed that 39% of people are keen to pay twice as much for the same product if it comes from an organization they trust. How do they trust the organization? Because of its reputation. Reputation as treating people well, as treating people with respect, as treating the environment with respect by responsibly using the resources which are entrusted to this organization. So in fact, we see that for an organization, being a responsible world citizen is something that creates not only value for the customer, but creates value for the organization itself. This is where we have the business case. This is where we can start to put numbers behind that business case. How much of opportunity cost do you save by using properly your resources? How much of retention you generate with your employees? How much of additional value it creates for your organization in the knowledge you gain by developing these employees and gaining on their knowledge and experience? And also how much additional value you create with your customers, because they stay longer, they purchase more, and then they give you more resources to be able to afford to generate more value. And this is how this cycle keeps going. So it's also about organizational resilience here. How do you build an organization that will be able to be sustainable over time by using resources in a sustainable manner, treating people with respect, and having the most efficient and waste-less governance systems. So for one organization, that's a very nice way of looking at things. There's a problem. The problem is that we're not alone. You can't do all of that on your own because you have competition. And competition doesn't necessarily follow these rules. So what to do here? This is about creating a movement, and this is where organizations like PMI, but many others, have a responsibility to create that movement, which will embark as many organizations as possible, as many people, as many project managers as possible, as many professionals and incoming professionals, because these are the ones who will be the recipients of our responsibilities or lack of responsibility, and who will be able to continue that movement. So we need to create that environment where, in fact, sustainability, responsibility, individual responsibility, and corporate responsibility become, in fact, a selection criteria, an evolutionary selecting criteria. It's basically Darwinism. Organizations who don't follow these rules will anyway not be able to sustain themselves and will finally disappear. This is Darwinism in place. If 39% of the people are keen to pay twice as much for the same product coming from an organization they trust, these resources which are put into this trustful organization are coming from somewhere, because it's not created out of nowhere. So it comes from organizations who are not so trustful, and their business goes down after a certain point of time. It's our responsibility to actually either make people who run these organizations understand that, or to accelerate that decay of these organizations. It's also a responsibility to make sure that this message around the necessary inclusion of sustainability into projects, this necessary inclusion of sustainability into strategies, is not just a nice to have, is not just an option to be developed to support a marketing campaign. It's much more than that. It's an evolutionary advantage. It's something that will make the difference between surviving on a competitive environment or disappearing from that competitive environment. The more we do this on our own, the more we will have the possibility to have an impact on organization strategies. And don't wait for leaders in your organizations to suddenly have an enlightenment and discover that on their own. It starts with project managers. It starts with people who actually deliver the value for organizations and for customers. If you can prove it works, your leaders will follow the movement. This is how it goes. It doesn't go the other way around. You need to prove something before it's adopted. So it's our own responsibility here to educate ourselves, work in integrating these different elements of project management into sustainability. Very often I hear the question, what sustainability has to do with project management? It's actually the wrong question. The right question is what project management can do for sustainability. And then what sustainability can do to help project management being what it's supposed to be as a vehicle to deliver impact, a positive impact on society through the outcomes of a project, through the responsible determination of the value to be produced and of the impact to be produced by our different projects. And it's a complicated equation. It's a complicated equation because we are in times where profit must be generated. Very often we see on stock markets that pension funds, investments companies want to have a return on investment very fast, quick and dirty. But that's not how it works. Actually, if you wait to get some return on investment, if you enlarge and push forward your strategic horizon, your return on investment will be much higher than what you can have on the shorter term. So we need to include these elements into our own strategies, into the strategies of a project, so they are included into the strategies of the organizations. And it's an entire mind shift which we need to put in place to be conscious about all of these things and raise a consciousness. We can work only by contagion on these different aspects. And this is where we count on our communities. This is where we use at PMI, for example, programs like the Hours for Impact, which you see here is the logo. The Hours for Impact is a program which helps us to demonstrate how impactful in terms of creating long-term sustainable value for our community our efforts can be. How project management can effectively be the mean to deliver sustainable, positive impact on society. And we'll continue with that. It's something which is growing year after year after year. When this program has been created by PMI in 2019 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of PMI, we collected something like 75,000 hours. We're at more than 300,000 now. So it's something which is growing. It's something which is expanding. And we see that more and more of these Hours for Impact here are actually pertaining to the direct and concrete application of project management to social good. You have heard from Diana Lenders, who is the chair of Project Managers Without Borders. This is exactly what Project Managers Without Borders is doing. Applying project management to have a responsible social impact, positive impact on society. The more we manage to optimize the way all of these organizations are generating impact, the bigger is the impact. Because the less resources they use on one unit, so they can multiply the units. But it's the same for commercial entities. The less resources we use to produce a certain good or service, the more we can produce of this service, the more value we can create for customers, the more we'll be attractive, the more we'll be able to grow and develop sustainable practices, sustainable business practices. And finally, this is how we can contribute one step after the other, one stone after the other, to the overall effort of trying to make this place a better world. I think we have 10 minutes or even less for questions, comments, anxieties, insults.
We don't so much have questions that I've seen in the chat, but we do have some comments around how important it is for projects to deliver lasting outcomes for their stakeholders. I was wondering if there was anything around how we, as volunteers, can work more broadly with a wider range of stakeholders.
Yeah, so it is important. It is important because the longer actually you create that value, the longer potentially you can establish a relationship, a profitable and a nurturing relationship with your stakeholders. That's the entire idea behind it. So that's why, well, at PMI, for example, we're working to define a relationship, to create a relationship, establish a connection with our members from the early stage of your careers, all along with a journey that allows them to evolve and grow over time. And throughout what they're learning, throughout their professional development. So the longer you have this relationship and the earlier you have, this relationship, the better and the more profitable, beneficial, I would say even, is this relationship for both parties. In terms of volunteering, definitely this is the opportunity to be able to contribute in generating a positive impact. We see that through what we have done recently through the Educational Foundation with an organization such as Special Olympics International. We had some of our volunteers delivering project management training to this organization, so they have been able to implement a PMO, which have allowed them to be more efficient and better at organizing their World Games. And also, we have trained some of the youth there in project management, which has allowed them to develop 48 different community service projects which have been beneficial for their local communities. And not only related to sports, by the way. Some were for water treatment, some were for sports also, but everything aimed at generating a positive impact. So stay tuned. There's a lot of good things which are coming in the next month with PMI. I will keep you all informed about the development, but there are already a lot of things which are available. I was last week at the PMI Global Summit in Atlanta, and this is where I get my cold, by the way. So sorry for the voice. But we had a very nice moment with an organization, a local organization called Women of Project Management. who has as an objective to ease the development of gender equality into the project management profession. And they have an aim to include 100,000 women into the profession of project management. So that's also something which creates a positive movement, a positive impact on society.
Cool. Thanks very much, Olivier. I think we've got one more question, which it's a little bit political, so you might decide not to take it, which is, if we're thinking about the current more sort of global political context, and not so much the conflict side of things, more about the sustainable development and environmental commitments side of things, though obviously both are important. Are we finding, is it your observation, Olivier, at the moment that a lot of the time governments are pushing back against some of their commitments? How can we as a project management profession keep striving forwards? Is there that political will for us to strive forwards into?
So yeah, I see where this question is coming from. So the idea is also to bring more responsibility into the things. I mean, our commitments have whatever they are, have a long-term impact on the environment and environment in general. Environment, of course, environmental environment, but also social environment. Whatever we're doing, and more especially at a government level, will actually have impact for decades, if not sometimes longer. You in London, you know something about that. Whatever commitment a government makes, most probably they will not have to pay the price of that commitment, but it will be the next government or the government after that, which will have, and the population, which will have to actually either harvest or deal with the impact of these commitments. So it's also very important when we work with governments to make them pushing the strategic horizon, to make them understanding when the impact will actually hit. You can't have a governmental project nowadays with an horizon of 3 years. It's basically impossible. Whatever systems you're developing, the horizon has to be pushed as far as possible. And even in technology, I'm now working at PMI on a tech project. Merv Wyeth know what I'm talking about. Even if technology is evolving on a daily basis, and we probably know that if we make a technological choice today, in 3 years, that technological choice will be obsolete. Still, we need to plan beyond that, because we have realized, applying basic principles of program management, that we're making a 10 years commitment for community, for chapters, for volunteers. We're making here a 10 years commitment. So we have to be very, very careful about how our decisions are made. Most probably, so I'm not too much in a hurry, but when the outcomes of that particular project I'm talking about will finally be realized, I will not be at PMI anymore. So because it will be in 10 years or even more than that we will be effectively be able to measure the impact of that project. And it's very heavy because we're making decisions now that will have an impact on our community for the next 10 years.
Thank you very much, Olivier.
Take a mic.
Yes. Olivier, just taking the opportunity to jump in. I know we've talked a lot about the coalition of associations, and it's something that you believe in. And here within London, we're in a great position, some of our networks, to work with people like the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, and also through Esther and Mark with the Institution of Civil Engineers. So we are about partnering, and I think in a really strategic way. And I know, we've got your backing for that, and we discussed that. I was just going to mention, I think we've now formed a partnership or some such with PMO Global Alliance.
Yeah, we have acquired PMO Global Alliance. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we've
Acquired it. So, again, that I think is a really useful way to
Absolutely.
drive out some of what we're talking
I'm very happy about it.
Okay, good. I'll stop there.
As I was kind of hinting during my rambling earlier, we live in an ecosystem where we don't live in isolation. So we can't do anything all alone on our own. We need to create that movement. And initiatives like the one you mentioned about working hand in hand with other organizations, even working hand in hand with your competition, is often a good idea, because it's an entire ecosystem. There's a very good book about that called Co-Opetition, published in help me someone 96 by Brandon Berger and Naboth.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And picking up on that point with a beautiful segue that wasn't planned, we're now going to give you a coalition of panelists, Olivier, partly to let you also get a little bit of a drink of water if you need it. So could I please invite our panelists to the stage? You're going to be given handheld microphones so that this will all work. So we have Alexandra, you're nearest me. We have Kator. We have Soumya, and we have Malcolm. Please do come up, and don't worry, I'm not going to give you a get out the old piano organ, don't worry. And Olu is bringing the microphones. Wonderful. So we're going to do a quick sound check just to make sure that people online can hear us, because otherwise that will be a bit dull for them. So we're going to start at the far side. Alexandra, would you like to just briefly introduce yourself in a way that's compatible with a sound check?
I am Alexandra, and it's not working.
How are we doing, Shane?
Any good?
It's not.
It's me. Is that better?
It's on.
It's on.
So it's held really close.
Super close.
Is
that better? Okay, so I'm Alexandra. I have a number of hats. I'm the former executive director for the Centre of Digital Build Britain and the UK's National Digital Twin Programme. I'm currently an independent consultant in that same field, but also the director of the Climate Governance Initiative.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Kay. Kay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening. I think that works.
Yeah.
My name is Kay, and I'm the sustainability lead at the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. So I sit within the Project Futures team, and together our sort of business as usual requirements are to implement the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Programme, where the vision of us prioritising and optimizing benefits and outcomes for people and planet becomes the basis of how we intervene in the built environment so that we have a more adaptable and resilient system.
Brilliant. Thank you. Soumya, we're up next.
Good evening. My name is Soumya Parthisarathi. I'm a director of urban design and master planning at Arup, and I work on large-scale integrated city planning projects.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Malcolm.
Hello, I'm Malcolm Down, the Exec Director for Commercial Procurement National Highways, and National Highways in the UK runs a strategic road network in England, main A roads, all the motorways.
Brilliant. Thank you. And for the people online, I am Esther Gordon-Smith, Project Management Institute UK Chapter Sustainability Community of Action Lead. Try putting that in an email address. Cool. So today we're going to cover a few different topics. I'm going to swing around slightly. There we go, so I can see you better. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. One of the first points that I think we're going to cover is around connectedness, and just sort of understanding. We've just been doing a workshop in London, thinking about how some of these different sustainable development topics are interconnected. So how have you seen that working out in some of your day jobs? Have you seen things that are coming together in a more connected way than maybe they would have done 10 years ago? Malcolm, what happens if I say, would we like to start with you?
The simple answer is yes. If you just take, say, carbon net zero as an example, 3 years ago it wasn't really on the agenda. Now it's been very heavily built into everything that's been done. So, for instance, in national highways, when we do investment, we look at investment decisions. We're looking at cost, time, open for traffic dates, but we're also looking at the carbon content. So if you look at how things have been joined up across industry, it's changing significantly, would be my observation.
Brilliant, thank you. Have you noticed anything maybe about how National Highways has approached different contracting arrangements? Like, are we heading towards a more alliancing model or something like that?
We've looked at alliances. We use versions of alliances. But fundamentally, if you're looking at contracting, the best way of doing it is you've got to get that sort of collaborated, integrated approach with the supply base. Sometimes any sector, any business can try and be too clever. Often you just got to keep it to the basics, and that gives you the best outcomes.
Brilliant, thank you. Soumya, how have you found things being connected? I think you work in the built environment sector. Have you seen more of that?
Yes, I have. And the built environment sector, particularly the area where I work in, which is city planning, is sort of multi-sectoral in a way. And I would say that over the last few years, I have seen certainly efforts at breaking down what can be quite a siloed way of looking at things. So, as an example, if you're developing a plan, you typically have the transport team doing the transport plan, and the infrastructure team doing the infrastructure plan, and then the landscape team coming and designing the open space, and you overlay everything, and then you have chapters in your final report, which says that's the transport chapter, and then in the end you'll have a sustainability chapter as well, as if it's a separate thing. But over time, we've seen that what works much better is to define outcomes rather than, and a lot of people mentioned that today, rather than just talk about sectors and themes. So, for example, if you say, I want to achieve health outcomes, then the transport person has to see how you achieve health outcomes. The infrastructure person has to see that. The landscape person has to see that. The buildings person has to see that. You might have another outcome around decarbonization, and that again cuts across all the sectors. And so if you turn it on its head and define the project scope as something that's outcomes based, then you'll suddenly find that all your different silos have to achieve the same outcomes, and it promotes integration. So it's almost flipping the methodology to be able to achieve some of those goals that we would all like to.
Brilliant, thank you. Kay, in your work at the IPA, you see things across all sorts of different government departments and programs. Are you seeing things being more connected? I hope the answer's not no.
There's definitely some great stuff going on across government, and I don't think we focus enough on bringing those sort of progress into light. So we tend to get a little bit more scrutiny, but at the same time, I think I'm always a little bit more pessimistic and think that there's actually a lot more that we can do, and we really need to drive pace in this area as well. So whilst there's some good stuff going on around carbon cost being part of consideration and wider sort of connectivity, I think beneath all of that, I'm not sure if we have changed enough in terms of how we do things. And whilst we've got a good starting point with things like carbon, for example, the UN has described it, we have what they call a triple planetary crisis between the aspect of climate change, so greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss, and air quality. So at the moment, we've got reinforcing negative feedback loops. So I don't think we're looking across the system enough and understanding the interdependencies between different interventions to really leverage actually those sort of interactions within the system to our advantage. And if we're not careful in trying to drive progress in specific areas, we could be regressing progress in a much wider area around environmental and sustainability as a whole.
Cool, thank you. And Alexandra, in your work on the digital side of things and the twins, surely we're more connected than we ever were. Some people's washing machines have Wi-Fi.
I did incidentally spend a lot of time about 6 months ago trying to find a dishwasher that did not have Wi-Fi.
I know, right?
Because why do I need that? I'm afraid I'm a little more pessimistic, like Kay. I think we're more connected in a lot of ways, but we are still very siloed. There's some great work happening, mostly within projects, but our big challenges, our grand challenges, are systems, and systems are systems based. And we haven't changed the way we work, the way we do things, the way we connect ourselves and our data to really be able to tackle those. And until we do, we're not going to have a sustainable future. Exactly as Kay said, the triple planetary crisis, these interconnected systems, the intervention on one system affecting another, we haven't yet evolved how we're going to tackle that. And that needs us to break down those silos. It needs us to work together, and it needs us to think about systems rather than individual projects or individual people or individual organizations.
Cool, thank you. So I think sometimes you can get some really interesting insights out of panels. They're not always necessarily the prepared answers though. So you guys get an out here. You can pass if you think this is too difficult a question, but I think it'd be really interesting. So if we think we need to stop doing silos and we need to be more connected, because I mean, you know, the climate is connected to itself. What is stopping us? I mean, I know what's stopping me. I'm still a bit junior and I need to get a bit older and a bit more senior, but what is stopping us in the industry from making this right?
We are.
Cool. Kay, say more.
Ultimately, this is a collective challenge, but an individual responsibility. I think a lot of the time we expect other people to take leadership, to make the leap, to jump on the bandwagon. But actually, if we're expecting policies, regulations to change, you know, we'll be waiting years. And what we can control is ourselves. And if we start looking at individual responsibility, if we, instead of looking outward for leadership, we look inwards in finding our values, morals, ethics, for example, and become the leaders that we need, then we can start to drive change. And instead of, you know, waiting for those top down for people to tell us to do the right thing, we do it ourselves, and we find people, like-minded people, to start building that coalition so that our voices become louder and we drive the change bottom up.
Cool, thank you.
I couldn't agree more. So we are the people that we've been waiting for. We have to stand up and do it. We can't do it on our own. We can do it together. So that collective action, but we're going to have to change the way we do things quite radically. And that's scary. That's particularly scary if you've been in a position for a long time, you've been in the industry for a long time. I'm talking about myself here as well as others. We need to change the way we think, change the way we act, and encourage others to come along on the journey too.
Cool, thank you. One of the things that happened quite early in my career, I was working for one of the engineering consultancies, and they got all of the graduates to do a kind of interdisciplinary thing. And that was actually really transformative for me because, you know, a little bit like you were saying, Soumya, you know, the transport guys are the transport guys and the landscape guys. They actually just made us study all of the disciplines. And my engineering degree did the same. It made us study just all of the disciplines so that we understood each other. You're talking here to an audience that's a project management institution, you know, it's part of the profession. Is there something like that we could do differently for young project managers?
I think yes, because I'm just go back to the previous question. I think change will happen top down and bottom up, and I think I absolutely agree that we have to redesign our systems and we need to think, you know, systemically, but that can be quite paralyzing for people who aren't working at systemic level. Most of the people work at project level. In fact, I was looking at a design economy report, and something like 90% of design businesses are under 10 people across the UK. And so what can a business of 10 people do from a systemic point of view? So I actually think, yes, you have to work at the systemic level, but the power of working on really good projects where you test innovation and you think how it can scale up, is another way of looking at making change. And I think in some ways, project managers are the center of these multidisciplinary teams you're talking about. So if the project management education can promote better conversation between disciplines, so that the project manager, no matter how young, can say, hey, have you thought of that? You should talk to that person. I think that can be quite powerful if lots of projects do that, personally.
I agree that could be powerful. Awesome. Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Mark.
I tend to look at things in a more simplistic way. So if I look at simplicity, it's we should all be leading things better than we inherited them, fundamentally. And I use two examples. So social value and then carbon, that are live activities we're doing within highways to illustrate. So on the social value part, the generation is most interested in social value, the younger generation coming through, because they really get a buzz from it. The older people are less so. There's a lot of passion, but it's the younger generation really passionate. And what we've done with social value in highways, we've simply taken it, because it is a government requirement. 10% of all tendering should be against social value, which includes carbon against the government definition. So we've taken 2-3 years to learn how to tender for social value. Now every contract we do has got social value built into it. We've done it 4 times, we know how to do it, and we're getting the results. And also we've just launched the National Highways Social Value Dynamic Purchasing System, which is a very simple, long-winded way of saying we've got a portal that any social enterprise can bid into, and this is enabled for the entire UK public sector, so anyone can use it. So providing individual organisations take the initiative and step forward, it's the marginal gains piece. You can then move things forward in that way. If you take the carbon agenda, we've set out very clear roadmaps for asphalt, concrete, and steel, because they're our biggest source of carbon. Those roadmaps have not been done by us in isolation. They've been done with the major providers to take asphalt and concrete. It's Holcim, Heidelberg, and CRH, and the trade bodies, be it Mineral Products Association, Eurobitume. And those roadmaps go out until 2040 that show how we can step the carbon content of, say, asphalt down by 70%. It relies on new technology. Carbon capture and storage, for instance, is going to be the big benefit. But if somebody doesn't lean forward and do that, then it doesn't move. But everyone has to be willing to lean forward and do things. So within our organisations, every organisation has to lean in and do something. And that critical mass of people leaning in will move it forward. If people sit back and go, a bit hard this, let's try and make it too complex, nothing gets done. So everyone has to lean in a way that they can do. And in our case, because we're a client organisation, part of the client role is to catalyse change in the sector. So everything we do, in many ways, is to improve UK PLC, as well as building roads and maintaining roads, etc. But if from a supply base, we catalyse change in UK PLC that then becomes a norm across UK PLC, that's success. We're the biggest single buyer of asphalt in the country. When we moved to warm mix asphalt as a standard, the industry, within 2 to 3 weeks, had defaulted to warm mix as a standard. That's when you know you've got that influence, you have a moral responsibility to use it. So it is about everyone has to lean in. Otherwise, it's too easy to sit back and go too hard.
And you're right. I think there are some fantastic examples of that in the room, actually. Some of the people who've come this evening are people that I've worked with. And yeah, we were down in the trenches in a few bits, weren't we? But saw some progress. And some of that was because, me as a younger person with some ideas, got to work with other people who helped to make some of those realities. And yeah, we got some wins, so that's good. Olivier, I think you were going to come in to say something. Yeah. I was wondering how the Project Management Institute could help that thing around training project managers to be that central cog translating between all the disciplines.
Yeah, so education is super important, definitely. And we're trying through the efforts we're doing with our academic engagement initiatives and our educational foundation, of course, also to bring project management as soon as we can, and basically bring also project management as a skill for life, not only as a technical business skill. And I think this is where it starts, but we need also to continue the movement afterwards, because it's too easy to give up on that. We sometimes have to remind organizations that basically 12% of every single investment is wasted because of poor project management application. So it's a lot of resources. It's a lot of money. So again, we have a business case here to defend. And what organizations like PMI, and we're not the only ones on the spectrum, but organizations like PMI can bring is definitely this part of education. We're working hard on that. But it's also the connectivity, and connectivity between practitioners, connectivity between disciplines, connectivity between industries, connectivity between organizations. And I think we also need to be very careful with connectivity. What kind of connectivity are we talking about? Connectivity between systems or connectivity between people, individuals? And it will happen very much between people, more than between systems and procedures. I see very often that organizations, governments, even leaders, executives in many organizations say, oh, let's put this process in place. So this process connects to this process, which connects to that system. And if the systems talk one to each other, things will happen. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because they think and they put the systems and processes as being the key element of an organization, as in fact, the key element of an organization is people, employees, customers, stakeholders overall, but human stakeholders. Let's remember that whatever we do it by humans, for humans, with humans. If you don't do your project, if you don't deliver your project for a human being, with a human being, by a human being, then what are you doing? Connecting systems is nice, but in fact, we also enter into very often a problem, which is the illusion of mastery. The more indicators, social value impact, SROI, and so on. Of course, all of this is useful, but aren't we hiding behind these indicators to try to prove ourselves that we're doing something? Aren't we hiding behind all of the systems to prove ourselves that we are in mastery, in control of the things? Are in fact we're not. The only thing which we're doing by multiplying systems, connections, and everything is to increase the overall entropy of the system. Entropy of the system is by increasing the complexity, you in fact increasing chaos within the system. French writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, perfection is achieved not when you can't add anything anymore, but when you can't remove anything anymore. So the simpler are all the systems, the lighter is the governance place around this thing, the more space there will be for humans to interact effectively, connect, and work to make all of this happen.
Cool, thank you. In the 6 systems for transformation that we've got, one of the systems for transformation is economy and finance. And over the last year, one of the things that we've sort of come to understand is that quite often the discussions around projects and the funding of projects are not necessarily very joined up. So in fact, I asked a group of people to be speakers on the subject of how do we talk about economy and finance in the projects world? And in the end, I didn't really find any speakers because nobody felt that they were qualified to speak on the topic. I mean, it may be that I literally just don't know anyone, that's possible. But I did ask a lot of people. So if we're thinking a little bit picking up on Olivier's points, one of the reasons that the economy is so effective is because it's all based on money, which is a simple unifying way of organizing stuff that is very useful. And that's why you can have just this huge degree of decentralization. Market forces can be at work because billions of people are choosing how to spend their money in a sort of common and consistent basis that is finance or capital. Capital and projects are really, really important. If we were thinking about how we could join some of those conversations up, okay, I've got to turn this into a question, haven't I? So if we've got a real importance about talking about finance and how we find the money for projects, opposing ideas of order and chaos, but also over-prescription and decentralization, because those are often in tension. How could we approach projects differently to bring in some of the funding thing? Oh, this is a crazy question, isn't it? What's the future of project-private partnerships? There you go. That's a simpler version of it. Alexandra, you were about to say something.
The project-private partnership bit I can't answer.
Okay, that's great. Answer another part.
How are we going to bring in finance and the project piece together? By having the right data so that we can reward better run projects with better outcomes financially. That is already happening through digital twins and through other forms of modelling. So you may find you've got cheaper insurance. You may find you've got a reduced interest rate on your loan. You may find that it's much easier to sell your asset once you've built it because you have all the data from it. It has a better sales price, but B, actually it's much more liquid as an asset. So it's already coming in. And the asset managers, the financial asset managers, the pension funds, they are very much looking at infrastructure and infrastructure projects as a massive part of their portfolio. So there's a huge amount of work being done on this. So it is happening, it is coming, or it is, well, it's here now, it's increasing, I think is what I would say.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, Soumya, thank you. Have you got something to say in answer to my confused?
I mean, one of the things that we hear a lot about is the growth in green finance, which is capital that follows sustainable projects. And, a lot of pension funds have money to invest in, as do a lot of banks and investors that are looking for projects that fulfill certain criteria. And you hear in the built environment certainly a lot of talk about stranded assets, which is, if you design buildings and infrastructure that's not green, after a while you won't find tenants for it, and it'll become obsolete very soon. And so in long-term investors absolutely don't want to invest in those kinds of projects anymore. And so I think we also often hear that there's a lot of money on this side, but not enough projects fulfilling the criteria. And so there's pots of money there. Now, I can't say how much that is, but clearly at the moment, there is some alignment that we as project designers and project managers can do to develop good sustainable outcomes on projects, be able to measure it and demonstrate it, and thereby make some linkages with investment that's out there. And I think there's a lot more we can do to align those two, the availability of some kinds of funding and preparation of projects that can be funded.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that allows me to throw in one of the stats that I quite enjoy throwing into things. So I think it might be the UN or the World Bank or some important body has identified that we need to spend $100 trillion on sustainability over the next decade or 20 years or so, some astonishing amount of money. And UK GDP, give or take, or government spending in the UK is something like 1 trillion. Pension funds and institutional investors manage something like 100 trillion, like each or something. It's a lot. There are so many zeros. We're not going to be able to invest $1 trillion a year in sustainable development with public funding. It is not possible. One of the biggest economies in the UK spends that much one of the biggest economies in the world spends that much keeping itself afloat. So how do we get to that institutional investment, or where the money is sitting, and get the sustainable development projects that we need? Any takers?
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't like to differentiate projects from sustainability. I mean, sustainability aspects have to be embedded into any type of project. So what is a portion of each, whatever it is, project budget which you dedicate to make sure that you're delivering something sustainable in a sustainable manner. So basically, what is the portion of your budget which you finally dedicate to properly manage your project? We hear a lot about projects who are wasting resources because they are over budget, over timeline, over everything. Honestly, I spent 20 years doing organizational and project management consultancy before joining PMI. And I've rarely seen something as an over budget project. Very often it was denial from day zero of the project of how much it will effectively cost. The project has cost what it was supposed to cost. It took what it was supposed to take. The only thing that people were saying, oh, if I give a realistic budget estimate, I will not get the budget. Maybe you shouldn't have. If I go into my risk management plan properly, my project will not be approved. Maybe you shouldn't have. So the money is here in each and every single project. The money is here. It's all about how we use it more than where do we find it. It's really, it's a common responsibility that we have to start looking at things as they are. I mean, I think all of the current environmental challenges we have are a wake-up call. So wake up, guys. If you don't plan for the risks on your projects, they will anyway happen. And no, your project, which is supposed to cost 500, if you budget 100 for that, it will still cost 500. And most probably you will have to replan everything, so it will cost 550. So yeah, the money is here. It's about how we use it and how we decide. It's a matter of making a decision.
Thank you. So one of the hypotheses is the way we get the money to invest in sustainable development is we make sure that everything that we're delivering is sustainable development, ergo it's being invested in sustainable development. Good option. Kay, is there any sort of role of the IPA in how projects could be delivering sustainable development as they are now? Are we doing the right projects for that now? That might be too hard.
I think the second part might be too hard.
Yeah, that might be too hard.
I want to echo Olivier's point and everything that we've said so far, actually, that it starts with project management. I went into project management because I saw that we can address the climate crisis through project management. It's about how we do things more now than what we do. So I started my career in engineering because I thought as a child the best way to solve climate crisis was to invent something to suck out the carbon. But then as we sort of evolve through the years, it's more about how we influence the system, how we create that enabling environment for people to deliver and therefore become that cog to bring those multidisciplinary individuals together to start to think about things in different ways and start to think about systems. And it's absolutely about how we ensure how we do things result in sustainable outcomes rather than sustainable solutions in itself, because we haven't maximized opportunities within the constraints that we have right now. So even if we have all the money in the world, it doesn't guarantee that we're going to deliver anything more sustainable, because we haven't changed, how people do things, how we behave, what we value, our mindset and our heart set. So systems, tools, technologies isn't going to make a difference unless people change how they do things. And I think one of the things that we want to try and do within project delivery as a whole is how can we take that individual responsibility? How can we, as the project delivery community, help to drive that value culture so that we can think about being outcomes-led, value-driven, data-driven. We spoke about data earlier. People enable data, data then empower people. But everything comes back to people, how we do things. So I think that should be the main focus, as well as money and other stuff that we want to talk about.
So I think that's another really interesting idea. Even if you gave me my $1 trillion a year to play with, we probably still wouldn't spend it right and pull it off. That's a bit pessimistic. Malcolm, I know you had a point, and then Soumya will come to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's more about how can you make it as sustainable as possible, because what is as sustainable as possible today will be very different to what it could be in 10 years' time. So you're back into you got to keep moving it forward. It's the marginal gains piece. We know if you just say carbon capture has been trialled. There's some big large scale trials being set up in the UK. In 10 years' time, carbon capture for concrete plants, asphalt plants could be relatively common, because the technology's there, it's proving. And the UK's got a unique position where you've got a load of empty gas fields and oil fields that you can pump the carbon dioxide into, which not everyone has. So providing every project is being as sustainable as possible within its constraints, then you move it forward. There's never enough money. I've never worked in a business where you have enough money, you have enough people, you have enough everything you want. You never have it. So it is about doing the best you can, and that moves the dial forward. But if you don't do that, the dial is going backwards quite rapidly. So I think it's a mindset. So if you think about what can project managers do, make it sustainable as possible within the constraints that everything inevitably has. And it will come down to cash, because cash is not infinite.
Yeah, I agree with that. But just going back to your point, Esther, I don't think some of these large sustainability outcomes all need to be government funded. I mean, the private sector is actually at the forefront at funding a lot of really, really good innovation. And large companies, large private companies are much like the National Highways. I mean, you're doing great work. So are some really big developers who build millions and millions and millions of square feet by innovating and testing new building materials that could eliminate embodied carbon from their buildings. I mean, it's slow going, but that's where all the R&D is actually coming from. We work with a lot of utility companies like Welsh Water and others who are actually doing incredible amounts of good work about water consumption. I mean, it's a lot of private companies that are moving ahead on renewable energy, for example. So I think we shouldn't assume that the private sector isn't already putting quite a lot of money in renewable energy projects, both sort of standalone projects like energy and water, but also sort of sustainable development in other sort of more integrated disciplines. And I think part of the reason they're doing it is because they realize they absolutely need to do that if they aren't going to be investing in obsolete pieces of kit. And I think as project managers, we can really play a role in amplifying that and making it obvious in any scale of project that we're working on. So I think good communication about good outcomes will actually attract money. I mean, I'm being optimistic, but it's the projects that we can't make a case for that won't find money. We make a case for a project, the money will find it.
Yeah, if I may interject one thing here, the problem is that you find money for a project, you find money for a case, but in fact we should find money for the impact of the project. This is the very first element to be considered. Again, what is the final value to be created for the community, for the stakeholders overall, coming from the outcome of the project. We finance projects, we don't finance outcomes, and very often it's a problem. You mentioned green buildings or sustainable buildings, whatever. That's super nice to have a building that works on solar energy and recycles this and that. If the building is empty, it's still a waste. And now we're with a lot of organizations, including PMI, by the way, that is 100% virtual. What do you do with this kind of of building? It can be as green as possible. You will have a very good financing to build it, but it still remains empty. So we need to concentrate this on what is the financing you need, not for the project, but what is the financing you need to generate the expected value from the outcome of the project. And that's also a mindset.
And as a benefits manager, that is my job. I couldn't agree more. Alexandra, we haven't heard so much from you, and we've got about 6 minutes left. So
I haven't got a whole 6 minutes, but I would love to add to Olivia's
go ahead.
Which is that totally agree that we need to be looking at what are the benefits, what are the outcomes, and financing based on that. It's a little bit like servitization, if you wish. But one of the questions we also need to ask ourselves is maybe that's not delivered by a project. Maybe that's delivered by doing something else, which probably is heresy in a room of project managers. But sometimes the right thing to do is not to do the project. It's to do something different. And we need to find a way of having those discussions. What's the best value per pound spent for the outcome that we want?
Brilliant. We're going into everybody getting a last couple of minutes. So Malcolm, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just building on Olivier's point and your point, I don't believe that, for instance, highways should be spending money on R&D to develop individual products. That is the private sector needs to spend money on R&D. And Olivier's point about outcomes, if you take roads power the economy in the UK because you need to transport goods and products. By working with the private sector who are investing very heavily in new concrete, new asphalt, we can deliver an outcome which has helped the economy grow in the UK, and we can deliver an outcome in a far more sustainable solution. Because the private sector see the benefits, and they're investing because they see the benefits all around the world, certainly in the Western world, they're seeing massive benefits. It's how do organisations catalyse that change that bring it together to deliver an outcome to society in a way that is as sustainable as possible, and that will change over time. And if you can do that, the money's there, and the client investing in, say, road infrastructure will catalyse that change in the private sector, which in turn will generate the products, which in turn creates the benefits over the longer term. But it is the investment's got to come from the private sector, because why would the governments invest in it when they're going to get no return from it?
Cool. Sorry, I was like, when you're in the middle of like 3 different thoughts at once. So potentially Malcolm's closing point is client bodies such as National Highways do invest and recognise the excellent results of investment coming out of the private sector. Is that fair? Cool. Great. Soumya, closing takeaways?
Just the last point that was made is a very good example of some good systems integration, which is where we started, where different ecosystems do different things better, and the more alignment we can get between those, I think it'll end up with some really great societal outcomes, and that's where we need to be headed.
Brilliant, thank you. Kay.
I'm going to try and make things simpler. I think back to the point earlier around, starting with project management and I guess immediate actions that we can take away as well. The importance of education and training, etc. I didn't go into project management with any sort of project management qualification, etc. We have some sort of project management processes as part of our company. And that helps with governance and that helps with some consistency. But ultimately what mattered was people, the people skills, how we create that enabling environment for people. And one thing that we don't cover as much within education and training is around those, I don't want to call it soft skills, they're essential skills. And if organizations start investing in individuals to help them find that purpose and meaning and values, to have that passion to be leaders in themselves in driving that change forward, give them the capabilities and skills that they need, then ultimately we will have outcomes-led approach to things, decisions, solutions, etc. from the bottom up. Because regardless of what we want to do at the top with any funding policy, etc., people on the ground are the ones delivering. And if we don't invest in those people, those talent, and value people, nothing's going to change unless we do.
Brilliant, thank you. Alexandra, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think so. I think we need to move away from talking about sustainability and start talking about stewardship. I think this outcomes focus is incredibly important. So how do we get the outcomes that we want? And for me, that's moving away from thinking about productivity and efficiency and thinking about performance and effectiveness.
Cool, thank you. Olivier?
Yeah, totally agree with Kay's point here. And we need to redefine or finally realistically define what is the concept of value which we need to generate. Malcolm, you're building roads. Where is value created? Building the road or using the road? Most probably using the road is what really creates the value from that road. Of course, a construction company, contractor will get some value in revenue, but revenue is not necessarily equal to value. Where sustainability is found is in value and long term. That's embedded. If you look at the definition of sustainability in a Webster dictionary, you will see that it's related to the elongation in time of the creation of value. So we need to find that balance again between revenue, value, resources used, and finally put people and ourselves in front of our own responsibilities.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, panel. I'm going to give just a sort of final closing thought, which I came across from a podcast by Kate Blanchett, of all people. Asked her to be one of our speakers here. The amount of money that was asked for was not sustainable. But one of the points made is that a lot of the time we talk about, is it all about survival of the fittest? But it's possible that one of the key defining characteristics of humanity is it is in fact survival of the friendliest, because so much of what makes us human is the fact that we communicate richly and vibrantly, and we collaborate and we work together, and together we achieve far, far more than individuals ever could. And so on that note, thank you, very friendly panel. Thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Philadelphia.
Thank you very much.
We are now going to have the results announcement for the hack. Yes, Martin is standing up, thank goodness. So thank you so much, panel, and I'm handing over to Martin.
So I'm the next to last speaker for this summit. And well, I first would like to thank everybody who has participated and put a lot of work in our hackathon experience and experiment. We had not done it before in this context, and I'm sure it was a success. We had 11 teams out of 3 countries, and unfortunately, due to time schedule collisions, we didn't get any more, but I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have been able to handle any more. 11 teams it's really a lot of work. I would like to thank Juliana for supporting me, and I would like to thank all the judges, as to mention Liz and Eva and Agnes, who put a lot of effort in judging the merits of the individual proposals. So I will just announce them according to our the sequence we have. So the highest award for the highest impact is the team Alpha of the University of Nottingham. We have the best ideas to mitigate risks for the Gamma from the University of Nottingham. The best effort relationship between effort and benefits is the team Forest from Limerick. They supported us with sending 6 teams for the hackathon. Then the quickest to achieve benefits. It's ugly foods. It was quite interesting to see really ugly vegetables there, which are don't fit into the regular our regular concept of beauty of vegetables, but nevertheless they are good to eat. So they will promote ways to use them. The best impact measurement is the University of Poland in the University of Economics in Warsaw or Warsaw or Wrocław. I'm not very good at pronouncing this. The best use of external data is for EcoBlue. The best use of existing capabilities is the EcoSip. That's a very interesting proposal to use the ground coffee that has done its work to make new coffee pots. That was to use coffee to make coffee pots. It's quite an idea. So, but they're very optimistic that it will work out. The largest number of people positively affected, Smart Bites. They are dealing with obesity with people. The largest number of other organizations involved. As we have heard several times, we can't do anything alone. So we have to involve other people to work with us. That's the beta of the University of Nottingham. And the best presentation goes to CarpUL, University of Limerick again. And the best documentation goes to Wellnexa. We have seen, I think, very, very interesting and thoughtful project proposals. I was really surprised about the high quality of those proposals. They had only 6 hours. Well, they knew a little bit before what they were supposed to do, but today they had 6 hours to work on. And for that short time, the proposals were of exceptionally high quality. So I would like to thank all the teams and their mentors for their contribution. And then the last final words come from Murph.
Thank you so much, Martin. I feel we're sort of bookending the event together. So at 9:01 this morning, when we got Martin to the stage for our big start, and Esther knows how we did that. That seems quite a long time ago. And, you know, I guess kind of wow at this stage. I've got some people in the room that I've met for the first time. I got to know them online, Liz from the Netherlands and Martin from Germany. And some of our team have come together here at Arup Mission Control for the day. And it has been an amazing experience. We've had some fantastic hosts here at Arup that have helped make things work. It may have appeared like a swan gliding across the water, this conference had worked, but underneath, a lot of paddling going on. We've had a really, really strong technical team led by Jose over there in Brazil, but also Guillaume in Canada. They got up at silly o'clock this morning to join us and to make this happen. So lots and lots of thank yous. I can see Julia in the room. There are people online. I'll forget lots of names, but forgive me. You are in our thoughts, and we're very, very grateful. So as we come to an end, I guess I'd hark back to one of our first conferences, Transforming Net Zero COP26 2 years ago. And out of that, I know that Mark was very keen that it should be a stepping stone event. It wasn't an event in its own right. It was the start of something else. And we created a sustainability community of action, purposeful in terms of the action. And one of the things that we resolved to do was when we hold events or any activities like the 6 systems of transformation, was to not just inspire and engage, but to provide people with the tools and to mobilize them. And I feel that's what we've really done. So we had a really good day, planned in meticulous detail. Thank you, Esther, for doing that. I often tell Esther, I think she's doing too much. You may want to bosh this, that, or the other, but you know, she pulls it off. So I'm delightful. I've learned how to sponsor, to get out of the way, and to let the team take charge. There's been a fantastic job. Liz has done a great job in marketing. It actually resulted in 900 registrations for this event. We aimed for 1,000, we got 900. In fact, that was all the licenses we had to spare. So that was great. Liz has mentioned her YouTube channel. We want you to go there and hoover up the great content that we've got today. I think one of the things that I would mention, out of these events, there are kind of lots of planned takeaways, but I think also there's a lot that happens by serendipity. And I think some of those connections are really, really good. I've been pushing people to use the network function. It looks like lots of people are in there. We'll look at the reports, the top networker. We provided the carrots, we're going to give them a 100% Amazon voucher. And that's not just a gimmick. The networking is really, really important. We've made some great friends through this. There will be future conferences. We've worked with many of the teams before. We know how to pull these things off. So with that, I'm going to close the proceedings. Anything I've forgotten, team? No? Well, let's close the proceedings. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. And let's move ahead. Together we can. Thank you.